Hi, this is Zach, and we're going to continue with our Nadjorf series. Um, so we're still in the old main line, and after F4 we have looked at the poison pawn variation and the main line. I want to take a look at now the Kasparov variation, which is Queen C7. This was championed by Kasparov before he moved on to the poison pawn variation, which we already looked at. Um, Now, this variation can transpose into both the main line with bishop e7 and into the Gelfand variation with knight bd7. Um, but for now, we'll just take a look at the Kasparov variation. And on the main move here is queen f3. And if we look, white does have this extra option here of just taking um this knight, because now we see that these are doubled and his king side is very weakened. And if we the position becomes very dynamic because of this imbalance in the pawn structure. Let's just take a look at some other options. Um, F5 can be met with bishop e7. So we're not really afraid of this exchange. Taking and f takes on e6. After say queen d2 or queen d3. Just say queen d3 here, as protects this pawn more. Now knight c6. And black's position is very good. Short castling and bishop d7. Black has control of this e5 square, and he's gonna have a pretty good game. His development plan is very straightforward. Knight's e5 castling and bringing the rooks to these files. He's got these two pawns he can work with, and maybe eventually get something going with these. Another alternative here, instead of taking on f6 or queen f3, is just simply bishop d3. But this gives black a really good game. He's after b5, queen e2, and now b4. So before white has any chance to sacrifice the knight with d5, now the sacrifice would just give black extra piece. But knight now comes back to d1, and now bishop b7. No, I'm sorry, knight bd7, knight f2, now bishop b7. After long castling, bishop e7, rook h e1. This game looks pretty good for white because all his rooks are just coming down the center. But actually, black has a very good pawn sacrifice, which is h6. Of course, we don't really want to exchange off this bishop, because if it takes, the knight recaptures, and he's just given up his bishop. Or even better here, actually, it's just bishop captures. Now we've got this long diagonal. We have almost like a dragon bishop, because it's on this long diagonal. Knight will come to c5. So of course, that just gives black exactly what he wants. But after bishop h4 g5, this pawn sacrifice is very strong. Because f takes, h takes. After queen a5, forking both of these pieces, bishop takes, and now bishop takes. Black's position is very, very strong. We have this long diagonal. This knight is hanging. The rook pawn on h2 is hanging, so is this pawn on a2. And black's game is pretty much winning here, because he has everything for white is hanging. Knight comes back to b3, queen takes h2, and already this threat of b2 is next to impossible to meet. Just starting to take on b2. Not to mention this h2 pawn is going constantly weak. So even if black did want to go into an endgame, it'll probably be a very easy win. But let's take a look at this game. I want to take a look at the game with the main deviation from queen f3, and the main deviation, of course, is once we get to the position, bishop takes f6. This is most dynamic, and this is a game between Anand had the white pieces and Kramnik had the black pieces. After bishop takes f6, g takes f6, now f5, and the game became a very a sharp one, because already just seeing how much pressure he's putting on black center. Black has 4 pawns in the middle, and white is gonna throw everything as to attack it. So queen c5 now. Um, and queen c5 serves multiple purposes. It gets this queen active. It threatens this pawn on f5, and the game became a very interesting one. Queen d3, knight c6, knight comes back b3. So just attacking this queen. Queen now came over to e5, and after long castling, the game was very sharp. This queen is very well centralized, and this knight, oops, this queen is very well centralized. Knight may, what's wrong with my mouse? The knight may come to b4 eventually. So it led to a very sharp game for both players. The rook might become active on g8, and eventually the game was a draw. But if we take a look at the main line now, with queen f3, and queen f3 is there's some book, and now b5 is played, and now f5, and again, this is just a beautiful example of how of how active and dynamic the Sicilian can be. With Black's plan of putting pressure on this pawn here, knight b to 7 to c5. Again, we see this plan very often, the knight coming to c5. And maybe even putting pressure on the queen also, while Black is trying to bust open white center and get to his exposed king. So f5 is played here, and now b4. Again, if we can look at another game between Stellwagen and Persson, and it's Perrrson. After b5, again we have this exchange on f6, and it's the same idea as before, just trying to take advantage that there's no queen on d8 or knight on d7 or bishop on e7. And after g takes f6 and long castling, again, there's all these imbalances. After b4, knight c e2, h5, very strong because he's getting this pawn ready, and so before he's trying to grab space on the king side. He can't castle to the king side, and it's preventing any sort of pawn storm. And after knight g3, h4, knight h5, and knight d7, Black had a very Black's game was very good, but again the game led to a draw. But if we go back to the book line, after the b5, f5, b4, knight c, b5, and now this line it becomes very complicated because just sacrificing a pawn or a piece. I'm sorry. But after a takes b5, bishop takes b5 check, and it's like what have you given up this piece for? But bishop takes d7, and now it's clear, taking on e6, and f takes e6, bishop takes b5, and of course this leads to just the play is it's going to be very hard for Black, because now knight takes on e6, just attacking this queen. This piece is going to fall. The game's going to become very difficult. So just exchanging immediately. Bishop takes b5, knight takes b5, queen c5, and after bishop takes f6, and so bishop takes f6. And queen takes b5. The position is again very, very hard to evaluate, but bishop takes g7 was played here. And after bishop takes g7, queen takes on f7, king d8, and queen takes g7, rook e8, and rook f1. Um, Now play continue with b3. C takes b3 and queen a5. And if king d1, this position is given as much better for black. It just shows the complications that can come of the Sicilian Nadjorf. So I think that's part of the reason this sacrifice as to why the line went so out of favor, and now we see more of the main line or poison pawn variation. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time with the Gelfand variation.